Hello again, marketing research students. It's Dr. G. This is the third video that I have for you to help you navigate through assignment number 5, our data analysis for the Titanic database. In this particular screencast, what we are going to explore is how to run descriptive statistics for the Titanic database. What this is going to allow you to do is learn how to create some great statistics for you to analyze that will also help you in analyzing your actual research project that you're working on for the end of the course. So think about this assignment number 5 as sort of a practice to be able to get you to learn how to navigate Excel to run some statistics for you to analyze. So here is what I want you to do. In the last two videos, the first one I had you get the analysis tool pack on your computer, your PC or your Mac. The second was for you to find and open the Titanic data set that we will be using for our assignment number 5 analysis. And we also looked at the data set and the variables that we'll be analyzing. So you should be familiar with that data set by now. So what I want you to do now is to go into your Canvas module. Module number 5, we're working on data analysis. And as you can see here, if you scroll down, our assignment that we're working on are all of these files here, and I know it seems like a lot, but we're trying to chunk this out in bits and pieces so you can have some manageable data to work with. So the assignment that we're working on right now is right here, assignment number 5. All of the tools that you're going to need and the instructions are right in that assignment. Now this assignment isn't due for a few weeks, so we're going to be practicing in class how to run these analyses. So what we're going to focus on today is how to run descriptive statistics. So if you scroll down here and all these beautiful files I have, we've already done this. We've already loaded in your tool pack onto Excel. You have gone in on the second video and you've taken this Titanic data set that I have in Canvas and you've gone through and named that data set under your own name, and that is the workbook that you're going to be using throughout this assignment as we go through and learn how to create each of these different statistics analyses. So the first thing that I want you to do right now is to go into this particular this instruction sheet for Titanic activity descriptions. Go into Canvas, open that up, download it, and this is the workbook that we're going to be using, the worksheet, to help guide you through this analysis. This is also going to be the first of 3 worksheets you are going to load into Canvas as your assignment for assignment number 5. So we're going to be working through 3 different analyses for assignment number 5. This is the first. So as you can see here, we have already gone through last time in class and then also in my tutorial video. We've already gone through this first page here. You've gone in, you've looked at the data file, you've renamed the Titanic data set under your own name. You've gone through and created a workbook tab called Data with all of our raw data in it. And now what I want you to do is we're going to focus on this descriptive statistics and what we need to do to understand how to run and analyze descriptive statistics on this Titanic data set. So what I want you to do now is find on your computer where you had loaded or renamed that Titanic database. So what I did right here, I named mine, I've got two files. I've got K Grayson Titanic here, and I've got K Grayson Titanic 2. Because I had a little problem with the first one, so I renamed it the number 2. So open this up. This is the data file that we are going to be working with as we navigate through your worksheet. So you can, what I suggest that you do is keep both files open or print off a workbook, a worksheet here for the analysis. If you were in person in class, I handed these out so you could write right on there, or you can write inside of the workbook as we navigate through this. So keep this open so you can see what we're doing. Now I'm going to open this up so you can see more specifically or clearly how I am using this data here. So I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger so you can see it. So what we are going to do once you have the data open is as we work through each of these exercises for assignment number 5, you are going to keep all of your data analysis and statistics that we run right here in one workbook, the workbook that you named with your name. And the reason that we're doing this is at the end of going through each one of these analyses, you are going to upload your completed work into assignment number 5, along with the 3 worksheets that we're working on. So at the end of the assignment, you're going to have your completed Excel workbook, 1 worksheet completed for descriptive statistics, 1 worksheet completed for correlation analysis, and 1 worksheet completed for regression analysis. So this particular tutorial is to show you how to work through the workbook for analyzing descriptive statistics. So let's work on this together. All right, so I will assume that you have your worksheet for descriptive statistics open and available. I am going to run through the steps and show you how you can go about running descriptive statistics on this data set that we have right here. So let's go through and I'm going to show you. The first thing we're going to do is on the navigation bar, select data on the top of the navigation menu. When you do that, if you have appropriately added in your toolkit for Analyzer, it's going to pop up right here. I want you to select Data Analysis right here on the far right navigation bar. You'll notice that we have a number of different types of analysis that you can complete using the Analyzer toolkit right here in Excel. And this is what we call a dialog box. So in the dialog box, the thing we want to do right away is we want to, in this particular analysis, we are going to look at descriptive statistics. So I want you to scroll through these different options and click on descriptive statistics. Once you have done that, the next step is to hit OK. So this is going to bring up another dialog box for you, and this dialog box is where we're going to have to put in or input all of the information that you're going to need to analyze the descriptive statistics. So the first thing that we are going to do is I want you to go down and see where it says New Worksheet PLI. What we're going to do here is we are going to type in the word descriptive. And what this is going to allow us to do is after we run our analysis, it is going to put your work for the descriptive statistics, the output, into a separate tab down here in Excel. So I want you to do this for this particular descriptive assignment. Go into this and write or type descriptive. the next thing that I want you to do is to click on Summary Statistics right here, and you'll notice that there's a confidence interval. We have a confidence interval of 95 that's already set. I want to make sure that this is set at 95. All right. The last thing that you want to do here is to create an input range. And now this input range here is going to be absolutely all of the data in the Titanic data set. So cursor down. You can do a cheat sheet if you want to cursor down. I'm kind of an old-fashioned geek this way. I like to see my data. I know it sounds really stupid, but I'm going to make sure the entire data set is highlighted. Once you've done that, click on this little box here or hit OK. And here you will see that the input range is all of my data. I also want you to click this Labels in First Row, because what that is going to do is to make sure that the variables are seen in the descriptives. So this is all you need to do in terms of the dialog box. Once you have completed these steps, select OK. Voila! See what happened here? We have created, based on the input of that dialog box, a new work tab, worksheet, that says Descriptives. And this data here, if you highlight it all and click on, double click on the column, you will see that this is all of the data that we have for your descriptive statistics. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save, because I'm a geek. I like to save a lot when I'm doing statistics because I don't like to lose my work. So let's look at this. What do we have here? We have some descriptive statistics here, and I want to show you for each one of your variables. So state, remember, is live or die. Passenger class is whether they were first, second, or third class. Gender was male or female. The age was the actual age of that passenger. And then an age range was simply some age ranges that I put together so that I could better understand the data set. So let's take a look at your worksheet here. So let's go into your worksheet. You've done all of this great information here. You've gone through the steps. Now what I want you to think about as you're analyzing the data is look at the means and determine whether you think that the means are a meaningful measure. So what I mean by that is a mean is obviously an average. And so if you could go through each of these, I'm just going to highlight the means. I want you to tell me, is the mean a meaningful piece of information for you or not, related to each one of these variables? So let's look at, if you remember from our variable database or our coded worksheet, state is 1, they lived, or 2, they died. So you can look at a mean, and the mean here is 1.59. So because we're using a binary variable, the mean probably isn't very meaningful for us because we're taking the average of 1s and 2s, just a label for us for statistics. So in my opinion, I don't know that that's a very meaningful statistic for me. However, if I were to go over here on age, and age is an ordinal variable where we go from smallest to largest. So in an ordinal variable, yes, the average age could be meaningful to us. So if I were to look at, is an average age of 29.88 or almost 30 years old, the average age of the person is 30 years old on the Titanic ship. Well, gosh, that's kind of interesting, right? So what I might do when I'm going to look here at my worksheet is I'm going to say, of all of the particular variables, are they meaningful? I would probably say something like, after reviewing the variables on the list, I found that the most meaningful variable is age. Because it is a ordinal from young to old, and I look at an average, the average age is of 30, which for me is kind of an interesting statistic. It's meaningful. So maybe if I was thinking about those passengers on the Titanic, if the average age of 30, man, that's pretty young. I was thinking maybe the elderly. There were more older people on the ship. So that's kind of what I want you to do. When you analyze the data, I want you to look at how meaningful that each one of those variables are, and just tell me which ones do you think make sense from a mean perspective or an average. So once you do that, go ahead and complete that workbook or that particular question on the analysis. Now let's look at the second question. The second question is, after you've looked at which of these variables might be meaningful, and as I looked at the data, I thought really the only meaningful variable to me, since the rest of it was age, because it was an actual number of a person, like an ordinal number. Are they young or are they old? The other variables that we had assigned a code to, like a binary code. Are they female or male? So if you average those out, it probably isn't quite as meaningful as looking at the entire data set of the ages of people on the ship. So that said, what I want you to think about is is the standard deviation important? So let's look at our data set here. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've highlighted on my worksheet each of the standard deviations. And if you recall, while looking at a standard deviation, what that does is determine how close the data points are to the mean or the average. So for example, if I were to ask people what they were willing to pay for a particular product, say, for example, it's a soda at a convenience store. The mean is the average of all of those answers that people might give me. Perhaps they're going to say, I will pay $1.37, or I'll pay $15, or maybe I'll pay 30 cents for that soda at the convenience store. So what we are looking at doing here is analyzing how close all of those data points are to that mean. So for example, if it's high, there may be some price points that aren't close to the mean if the standard deviation is high. If the standard deviation is small, the price points are close to the mean. So in pricing a product, that information would be useful to you, because you could make a good business decision on creating the final price. In terms of looking at the Titanic passenger data, understanding the standard deviation of the average age of the passengers may be interesting. So let's take a look here. So here we've got the age. The standard deviation is 14. So a very small standard deviation would be close to 0. And in this case, it's pretty high. It's 14. So it's a higher standard deviation. So what this is telling us is that as you look at all of the passengers on the Titanic, there's a wide range of ages there. So we took those wide ranges. Say you had a couple of babies on board that had like an age of 6 months, to maybe some elderly people in their 80s. So if you average all of those people together, you're going to have those outliers that will influence the standard deviation of that mean. So as I look at it, is it really interesting for looking at standard deviation for age? Might say, yeah, it is. It's pretty high, which tells me that in looking at the Titanic database, if I were to answer this question, is standard deviation important? Related to age, what it's telling me is that there is a wide range of people, or maybe some outliers that's skewing the data. The closer or smaller, the closer you are to 0 on a standard deviation number, is the closer those data points are to the mean. So hopefully that helps you with better understanding the answering those 2 questions for the first part of this worksheet. Next task that you have for the descriptive statistics is to look at frequencies of information for the particular passenger. So we're interested in understanding maybe how many men there were on the ship versus how many women, versus what age somebody might be, and did more men die than women died? Or you always hear that women and children off the ship first. Did that really make a difference in looking at men versus women and whether they died or not, or children versus more elderly people? So we're going to do a process called pivot tables, and I'm sure that you've done this in your statistics class. So we are going to create pivot tables to answer some of those questions regarding looking at the different pieces of information and variables and how they relate to one another. So as you work through your worksheet here, we've got our task number 2 here, in which you create pivot table charts to analyze the following variables that look at frequencies. So as you go through this, I have some instructions on how you create pivot tables. If you haven't done this in a while, it's always a little bit, it's always a good refresher to kind of play with it a bit. But what we're going to create the pivot tables for are to answer these questions right here. The first thing that we are going to do is answer the following question. Count how many people lived and how many people died using these variables: state, and remember state is they lived or died, and passenger class, first class, second class, or third class. So that said, what I would like you to do is to read through these instructions and try to create a pivot table that will answer these questions. So let's go back now to your data set. This is what we did before. Remember, we did our beautiful descriptives. You finished that part of the worksheet. You've got a nice tab there. We're going to go back to your data set. And I want you to go to the data set here. And one thing that you may want to do is create another tab and call it Pivot Tables. This is where you can place your frequency charts. Sometimes, and we did in class last week, was we put the pivot tables right here by the data. You can do that as well. For this particular example, I'm going to show you how to create your pivot tables in a different worksheet. So this is how you are going to go about looking at frequencies based on these variables here that we're interested in better understanding. Because I'm wondering personally, was there a difference I want to look at the numbers of people by passenger class, whether you were in first class, because they always say, you know, if you're at the bottom of the ship, you have a higher chance of not making it, versus if you're at the top of the ship, you can just jump off into one of your tow, or what those little boats are called. I want to look at passenger class and whether these people lived or died. So the first thing I'm going to do, as you can follow this right along on your worksheet, is I'm going to create a pivot table, and you do that going to the navigation bar and insert. Way over here on the left navigation, there is a pivot table option. Once you hit the pivot table, you are going to select the table range. And my table range is already selected because it remembered it when I did it in the last piece. If you want to, if it's not selected, just take everything, including your table, your labels. We can do like a control end to go down. As I mentioned, I'm kind of an old school girl. I like to make sure all of my data is highlighted because I'm real picky that way. So once you've done that, either hit OK, hit Enter, or your little box here. And then once you've done that, you've selected your table range, you're going to then place your table in a particular box. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the existing, actually I'm going to select an existing worksheet, and I'm going to put it right here. Put my data here. So I went into my pivot table worksheet, I selected A1, and then I am going to hit OK. Once you hit OK, what is going to happen then, if you follow along on my instructions, you have some pivot table chart options here. These are the fields that you can look at. So you can see all of your variables are populated up here. And we can do what's called a crosstab, where we can take and select the variables that we're interested in. So if you recall, my first question in the worksheet is I'm interested in understanding whether or not people, the state, lived and died, and then what passenger class they were in. So how you create this pivot table is, see how when I selected them on here, these are my two variables of interest, they automatically populated into rows and values. Well, really what I'm looking at understanding here is I'm looking at understanding the state. So I'm just pulling my data into the way I want to look at it. So I want to have a row. So you can see over here, I'll make it a little bigger for you to see. As I selected these particular variables, I drug them into the rows. So here, I can see that state, my first variable here, is here's the people who lived. I'm just going to put that for my own notation. And these are the people who died. Click back in the pivot table and it will bring up the pivot table field again. So you don't necessarily have to do this, label these. It's easy for me to be able to remember how I coded the data. So this right here would be first class, second class, and third class. So I decided I'm going to label these just so I can remember how I coded these. And if you want to get the table back, the fields, just click right in the table line here. So this is interesting. This is going to show us how we coded the data. Now what we're interested in is understanding as we look at this, we want to count how many people actually lived and died by passenger class. So go back up here, right here into pivot table fields, and I want you to drag this down into values. And it asked me if I wanted to replace it. Yeah, it copied over my nice little labels there. Want to drag? Do that later on. Okay, so yes, I wanted to do this. Now look at what this is doing. This is summing all the information. I don't want to sum the information. What I want to look at is a count. So if you click right here under values, you can then select a sum, an average, a minimum, a maximum. We are going to count the number of people. That's what I want to know. So I selected count, and you can see here what it's done is it has counted the number of people. This again is the number of people who lived, the number of people who died. This was first class, second class, third class. First class, second class, third class. So let's look at the numbers here. So if you look at those people who lived, 181 were in the first class cabins, 115 were in the second, and 131 were in the third. For those who died, 103 were in first class, 146 were in second class, and 370 were in third. If you wanted to take this a little deeper, you could do percentages here and look at it. Whatever you want to analyze is good, but we use this type of pivot table to be able to cross two different variables for us to look at frequencies, averages, anything that will be meaningful for us to be able to describe or see what's happening. So let's go back to our worksheet here. This is what I want you to do once you've run your analysis. Get both of these popping up at the same time. Once you've run your analysis here, then you are just going to populate this information into the tables. So if what I see here is that the people who lived, so remember on class is the people who lived is number 1. You had 181, you would type that in here. 181 lived. In second class, 115 lived. In third class, 131 lived. And then you're going to populate the ones who died. So this is how you go about creating a pivot table in Excel. Now what I want you to do is I want you to try to do this on your own. Create a pivot table for those who lived and those who died in terms of whether they're a man or a woman. So again, what you would do here is you go back into your data set. I always like to be way up front here in my first cell. Again, you're going to insert pivot table. I already have my data. I'm going to select where I want to put my pivot table. So I'm going to go and select here. I'm going to go into my pivot table. I'm going to put this information in row E1. So it doesn't interfere with what's going on over here, my first pivot table. So I'm going to select OK, and once I do that, then my options are going to come up here again. So let's look at what we're looking to identify. Again, we wanted to know how many women and how many men died. So we're going to count these. We want to count. So again, we're going to look at state, meaning did they live or die? That's meaningful to me. I am going to put state in a row, so you can just pull it right down there. Here, if you just look at who lived and who died, it's going to give you the numbers. But what I need to do here is I need to change this. So click in values. I want to change it to count, because I'm going to count the people who lived and the count who died. I don't want to sum everything. I want to know the actual numbers of people who lived and people who died. So you can see 427 people lived, 619 died, unfortunately. But my question was, I'm interested in understanding gender, the female and the males who died. So I'm going to click right on gender. And what Excel will automatically do is populate that under rows. I'm not interested in that. I want to know I'm going to pull this over, it populated into values in a column. I'm going to pull this over to row. And once you pull it over to row, then you're going to see, here's some meaningful information. I can tell based on who lived and who died what gender they are. So look at this. You can label this, as we know. Number 1 is they lived, number 2 is they died, because that is the way we coded it in our workbook. And we know that females were coded as 1 and male is coded as 2. You can look at female and male. So that's how you create the pivot table. You are going to transfer this data into your worksheet over here and let me know how many people lived and died. Now on your own, you're going to do this with age range, which is another variable here in your data table. So you're going to do that on your own, and you're going to populate the table for me. Once you've got all of your values in here, I want you to tell me, after analyzing, what is of most interest to you. Were you interested, what insights did you glean that maybe you had hypothesized for? Maybe you thought that there would be more men who died than women, or maybe you thought there would be more people over the age of 50 who died. You just want you to analyze the data and tell me what you think is interesting when you look at this. So I know this is a complicated task. It takes a while to get used to working with pivot tables, but trust me, once you do, you're going to be using these in your workplace all the time. We use these in marketing to better understand our target audiences and try to find segments. So although right now we're looking at doing this in the Titanic database, your end goal is going to be able to do this on your own set of data that you're getting back from your surveys. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Drop me an email in Canvas, and I promise I'll get back to you quickly and walk you through this.